Margaret Turner had never been the type to dream about riches. At 74, her life in the quiet town of Willow Creek was simple but fulfilling. She spent her mornings tending to the roses in her garden, a tradition she had kept alive since her husband, Robert, passed away 5 years ago. Afternoons were for reading in her rocking chair by the window, sipping chamomile tea as she watched the world go by. Life was predictable, peaceful, until one seemingly ordinary afternoon changed everything. It started with a routine trip to the corner gas station. Margaret had been running errands, picking up some milk and bread, when she saw the flashing sign above the counter, "Jackpot at $12 million, could you be the next winner?" She had never been one for gambling, but on a whim, she slid a $5 bill across the counter and asked for a ticket. "Feeling lucky today, Mrs. Turner?" the young cashier, Jake, asked with a grin. She chuckled. "Oh, not particularly. But someone's got to win, right?" Little did she know, those words would soon take on a life of their own. 3 days later, the town was buzzing with excitement. The winning numbers had been announced the night before, and speculation was running wild. Margaret had nearly forgotten about the ticket, tucked safely in her kitchen drawer, until she heard the radio announce the numbers one last time that morning. On a whim, she pulled the slip of paper out, just to check. Her heart nearly stopped. Every single number matched. For a long moment, she sat frozen in her chair, staring at the ticket in disbelief. Could it be real? Could she, a woman who had spent decades living modestly, suddenly be a multimillionaire? Her hands trembled as she reached for the phone, dialing the lottery commission's number. After a long wait, an automated voice confirmed her worst fear: there had been an error in the system, and her win could not be verified. Margaret's chest tightened. An error? What did that mean? She had the ticket, she had the proof. How could they refuse to pay? She called again, this time reaching a real person. A curt voice on the other end explained that her ticket had not been registered in the system, meaning it was invalid. "That's impossible," she argued, her voice shaking. "I bought this ticket fair and square. I have the receipt." The woman on the line sighed. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but there's nothing we can do." Margaret's world tilted. This had to be a mistake. Maybe if she went in person, they would see reason. She grabbed her coat, stuffed the ticket into her purse, and headed straight to the lottery office in the city, an hour's drive away. When she arrived, she was met with cold stares and dismissive shrugs. The manager, a well-dressed man named James Calloway, barely looked at her as he repeated what the woman on the phone had said. "There's no record of this ticket being sold," he said flatly. "I'm afraid there's nothing we can do." Margaret's hands clenched. "So what, you're just going to take my money and pretend I don't exist?" Calloway gave her a tight-lipped smile. "Ma'am, mistakes happen. I suggest you check with the store where you purchased the ticket. Maybe there was an error on their end." Margaret stormed out, furious. Mistake or not, something wasn't right. She drove straight to the gas station, where Jake, the cashier, confirmed that she had indeed purchased the ticket, but the lottery's online records now showed no sale at that time. "I swear, Mrs. Turner, I rang you up myself," Jake insisted, pulling up the security footage. Sure enough, there she was, handing over the money, receiving the ticket. Everything was on record, except for the lottery's database. Margaret's gut twisted. Something bigger was at play here. She returned home, determined not to be silenced. Over the next few days, she made calls to news stations, local politicians, even an attorney her late husband had once known. The story started to spread. How could a legitimate lottery winner be denied her money? Soon, reporters came knocking. Margaret found herself sitting in her living room, telling her story on live television. Viewers across the country rallied behind her, outraged at the injustice. But the more attention she received, the more resistance she faced. Her phone started ringing with strange, anonymous calls. Some urged her to drop it. Others hinted at consequences. And then, one morning, she woke up to find her mailbox smashed, her garden trampled. Someone wanted her to stop. But Margaret Turner was not going to be intimidated. If they thought they could cheat her, they had picked the wrong woman. Margaret sat in her dimly lit kitchen, staring at the crumpled lottery ticket on the table. Her wrinkled hands trembled as she reached for her cup of tea, but it had long gone cold. The weight of the past few days pressed down on her chest. She had done everything she could, called the lottery office, confronted the manager, brought proof from the gas station, and even gone on live television. But nothing had changed. The lottery commission still insisted there had been an error, and her ticket was worthless. She wasn't just angry anymore, she was determined. If they thought an elderly woman would simply roll over and accept their lie, they had another thing coming. She would get what was rightfully hers. A knock at the door jolted her from her thoughts. When she opened it, she was surprised to see Jake, the young cashier from the gas station, standing on her porch. His face was pale, his usual friendly demeanor replaced with something more serious. "Mrs. Turner," he said, glancing over his shoulder nervously. "I think someone's messing with you. And maybe with me too." She gestured for him to come inside, shutting the door behind him. "What do you mean, Jake?" He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his messages. "I got a weird call last night from a blocked number. They told me to stop talking about your ticket. They said if I knew what was good for me, I'd keep my mouth shut." Margaret felt a chill crawl up her spine. "Who do you think it was?" Jake shook his head. "I don't know. But I checked the gas station's records again this morning. Something's wrong. Your ticket was sold, I know it was, but now there's no record of it. It's like it was erased." Margaret took a deep breath. This wasn't just incompetence, someone was covering something up. But why? What did they have to gain by denying her winnings? She decided to call the local news station again, but this time, she wasn't just telling her story. She was going to demand answers. Within hours, a small team of journalists arrived at her house, eager to dig deeper. They set up their cameras, ready to go live. "Mrs. Turner," one of the reporters said, "you've gone viral. Thousands of people are talking about your case online. Some are even threatening to boycott the state lottery until you get paid." Margaret's eyes widened. She had expected some local support, but a national outcry? That was more than she had hoped for. Maybe, just maybe, they could pressure the lottery commission into doing the right thing. But just as the cameras started rolling, a sleek black car pulled up outside her house. Two men in dark suits stepped out, their expressions unreadable. Margaret watched warily as they approached. Her porch. One of the reporters stood up, microphone in hand. "Who are you gentlemen?" The taller man flashed a badge. "State Lottery Investigation Unit." Margaret's stomach tightened. She had never heard of such a department before. "We need to speak with Mrs. Turner," the man continued, ignoring the cameras. "In private." The reporters protested, but Margaret raised a hand. "It's fine," she said, standing up. "I want to hear what they have to say." She led the two men inside, shutting the door behind them. The shorter man, who had a scar running down his cheek, wasted no time. "Mrs. Turner, we understand you believe you've won the lottery, but there are complications. There may have been a fraudulent sale of tickets at the gas station where you purchased yours." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "Fraudulent? What are you talking about?" The taller man crossed his arms. "We suspect a case of insider manipulation. Sometimes, employees at retail locations try to rig the system, selling real winning tickets to someone else, while making it appear like the original sale never happened." Margaret clenched her jaw. "Jake wouldn't do that." I saw the footage myself. He handed me that ticket, fair and square. Scarface, Margaret had already given him a nickname in her mind, sighed. Maybe. Maybe not. Either way, this is a serious matter. If we find evidence that the ticket was tampered with, it won't just be invalid, it'll be evidence in a criminal case. Margaret's blood ran cold. Are you threatening me? The taller man shook his head. Not at all, Mrs. Turner. We're just saying, for your own good, maybe it's best if you step away from this. Sometimes, these situations get messy. Margaret stared at them, her heart pounding. She knew exactly what this was, intimidation. They weren't here to help her. They were here to silence her. She crossed her arms. I appreciate your concern, gentlemen, but I'm not backing down. Scarface let out a low chuckle. You're tougher than you look, Mrs. Turner. But be careful. Not everyone plays fair. With that, the two men turned and left. Margaret watched from the window as their car disappeared down the road. She wasn't sure what scared her more, the fact that they had come to her house, or the implication that something bigger was going on behind the scenes. Later that night, she called Jake. Listen to me, she said, her voice firm. I think this goes deeper than we thought. I need you to do something for me. Jake hesitated. What is it? Go back to the station's security system. If they erased my ticket sale from the system, they might have erased other things too. I need to know what they're trying to hide. Jake agreed, though Margaret could hear the nervousness in his voice. Hours passed, and just as she was about to give up hope, her phone rang. It was Jake. His voice was shaking. Mrs. Turner, you're not gonna believe this. Margaret braced herself. Tell me. I checked the deleted files. The security footage from that day? Someone edited it. Your ticket sale wasn't erased, it was swapped. Margaret's stomach twisted. Swapped? What do you mean? Jake took a deep breath. There's another woman. A younger woman. She's on the edited footage, buying a ticket at the exact same time as you. The numbers are the same. But it's not you, Mrs. Turner. It's her. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Someone had stolen her win. And they had the power to cover it up. Margaret sat frozen in her chair, Jake's words echoing in her mind. Someone had stolen her win. Not by chance. Not by a clerical error. Deliberately. Someone had rewritten history to make it seem like she had never bought that ticket. And worse, whoever did it had the power to manipulate official records, erase evidence, and send intimidating men in suits to her doorstep. Her fingers clenched around the phone. Jake, she said slowly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her, who is she? The woman on the footage. Jake hesitated. I don't know her name, but she's definitely not a regular customer. I ran her face through a reverse image search. The closest match I found was a social media account, some influencer or businesswoman. But here's the thing. I think she's connected to the Lottery Commission. Margaret's heart pounded. Connected how? She's been tagged in posts with one of their top executives. The guy in charge of fraud investigations. It's like she has friends in high places. Margaret felt the blood drain from her face. Of course. That explained everything. This wasn't just an employee messing around with ticket sales. This was organized. A racket. A scam running from the inside. If she had just walked away, if she had just accepted their lie, they would have gotten away with it. But Margaret wasn't one to let injustice slide. She had spent her entire life working, scrimping, saving, never asking for more than what she earned. And now, the one time fate had thrown a fortune her way, someone had tried to snatch it from her. Jake, she said, forcing her mind to focus. Send me everything you have. Screenshots, footage, records. Everything. You got it, Jake said. But, be careful. If they find out we have this. They already know, Margaret interrupted. That's why those men came to my house today. To scare me off. Jake was silent for a moment. Then he exhaled sharply. Then I guess we go all in. Margaret hung up and sat in the quiet of her kitchen, waiting for the files to come through. She was about to expose something bigger than she had ever imagined. But she couldn't do it alone. She needed a lawyer. And not just any lawyer, someone who knew how to handle corruption. The next morning, Margaret made her way downtown to the office of Samuel O'Connor, a retired federal prosecutor turned private attorney. She had read about him in the newspaper years ago, how he had taken on corporate fraud cases, exposing white-collar criminals who thought they were untouchable. If anyone could help her, it was him. The receptionist looked skeptical when she walked in, as if an elderly woman in a cardigan and orthopedic shoes didn't belong in an office filled with high-stakes legal battles. But the moment she handed over the file Jake had compiled, everything changed. 15 minutes later, she was sitting across from Samuel O'Connor himself, watching as his sharp blue eyes scanned the documents, his expression darkening with every page he flipped through. This, he said finally, setting the papers down. This isn't just a simple case of fraud. This is a criminal enterprise. Margaret nodded. And I want to bring them down. O'Connor leaned back in his chair, studying her. You realize what you're up against, don't you? These people have resources. Influence. If they've been running this scam for a while, they've got insiders, in the commission, in law enforcement, maybe even in the courts. Margaret's lips pressed into a firm line. I've spent my whole life playing by the rules. And now I'm being told that the people in charge don't? That they get to cheat and lie and intimidate? No. I won that money. And I'll be damned if I let them steal it. A slow smile spread across O'Connor's face. You remind me of my mother, he admitted. She never backed down from a fight either. He glanced at the documents again. All right, Mrs. Turner. Let's make some noise. Over the next few days, O'Connor worked fast. He pulled in his own investigators, contacted reporters, and started drafting legal action. Meanwhile, Margaret played her part, going back on live television, calling out the corruption, urging the public to demand accountability. Her story gained traction. Social media exploded. Hashtags trended. Protesters gathered outside the state lottery headquarters, demanding answers. And then, something unexpected happened. One of the insiders cracked. A clerk from the commission, a woman in her early 30s named Lisa Monroe, came forward with an anonymous tip. O'Connor received a plain envelope in the mail, containing internal emails, transaction logs, and a signed affidavit. The contents? Proof that the Lottery Commission had been running a scam for years. Rigging winning tickets. Selecting winners connected to people in power. Erasing real winners from the system. And worst of all, a list of names, officials, executives, even local politicians, who had benefited from the scheme. Margaret's heart pounded as she read through the documents. They've been doing this for years, she whispered. O'Connor nodded grimly. And now we have the proof to burn them down. But before they could go public, something else happened. Margaret woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of shattering glass. She bolted upright, her breath caught in her throat. Then, a loud thud. Someone was inside her house. She grabbed the first thing she could, a heavy metal flashlight, and crept toward the hallway. Her pulse thundered in her ears. In the dim glow of the streetlight filtering through her window, she saw a shadow moving near her desk. They were looking for the evidence. Margaret's grip tightened on the flashlight. She wasn't a young woman anymore, but she was still strong. She had raised 3 boys, worked double shifts for decades, fought through every hardship life had thrown at her. She wasn't going down without a fight. With a surge of adrenaline, she stepped forward and swung. The flashlight connected with the intruder's head with a sickening crack. A grunt of pain. A body hitting the floor. Margaret grabbed her phone and dialed 911. "Someone broke into my house," she said, her voice steady. "And I have a feeling I know why." By the time the police arrived, the intruder was unconscious, sprawled on the floor with a black ski mask covering his face. But when they pulled the mask off, Margaret's blood ran cold. It was one of the men from the black car. And in his pocket? A badge. He wasn't just some hired thug. He was a state investigator. Margaret exhaled shakily. They had just made their biggest mistake yet. Because now? It wasn't just about the money. It was about justice. Margaret sat in the back of the police cruiser, her hands steady but her mind racing. The flashing lights from the patrol cars illuminated her small suburban street, drawing curious neighbors to their windows. Officers moved swiftly, securing the scene, and the unconscious man was being loaded onto a stretcher. Even as she watched them haul him away, she knew this wasn't over. If anything, this was just the beginning. A detective named Ruiz approached her, his face unreadable. He was in his mid-40s, with dark tired eyes that suggested he had seen enough corruption in his career to recognize it when it stared him in the face. He gestured for her to step out of the cruiser. "Mrs. Turner," he began, flipping open a notepad, "you're sure you don't know this man?" Margaret shook her head. "No. But I've seen him before. Twice." Ruiz raised an eyebrow. "Twice?" Margaret inhaled deeply. She was tired. Exhausted, really. But she would not let fear silence her. "He was in a black car with another man. They showed up at my house a few days ago, before I even knew my winning ticket had been stolen. They tried to intimidate me, told me to drop it." She paused, her eyes locking onto Ruiz's. "And now, one of them breaks into my house in the middle of the night. You tell me, detective, does that sound like a coincidence?" Ruiz exhaled sharply and glanced over his shoulder at the officers loading the intruder into the ambulance. "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." Margaret didn't wait for him to ask the next question. She reached into her coat pocket, pulled out the flash drive Jake had given her, and handed it to him. "Everything you need to know is on there," she said. "Surveillance footage, transaction records, internal emails from the Lottery Commission. It's all a scam. And now, whoever's behind it is getting desperate." Ruiz studied the drive for a long moment, then nodded. "Come with me." An hour later, Margaret was sitting in an interview room at the police station, sipping on a cup of stale coffee while Ruiz and his team combed through the files. She could see them from the glass partition, serious faces illuminated by the glow of computer screens, murmuring to each other in hushed tones. The room carried an air of urgency. Finally, Ruiz returned, closing the door behind him. His expression was unreadable. "Mrs. Turner," he began, "do you have any idea what kind of hornet's nest you just kicked?" Margaret met his gaze evenly. "I have a good guess." Ruiz sighed and sat down across from her. "Your evidence is solid. We cross-checked some of the names, and some of these people," he tapped the file, "have powerful connections. This isn't just about a stolen ticket. This is an entire operation. Bribery, money laundering, falsified winners, hell, even some ties to organized crime." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "This goes high up, Mrs. Turner. Maybe even to the top." Margaret stiffened. She had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed sent a chill down her spine. "What happens now?" she asked. Ruiz rubbed a hand down his face. If we go public too soon, they'll bury this. Destroy evidence, make people disappear. But if we don't act, they'll come after you again. Margaret didn't flinch. So what's the plan? Ruiz studied her for a long moment, then nodded, as if coming to a decision. We'll move quickly. First, we need to protect you. I'm putting a unit outside your house, round the clock. You don't go anywhere alone. Second, we need a public trail. If this story is out in the open, they'll be less likely to act against you. Margaret understood immediately. A press conference. Ruiz nodded. We'll arrange it with the district attorney. If the public sees your face, here's your story, they can't erase you. A flicker of something dark passed through his eyes. That's probably what they've been doing to other victims. Silencing them before they could speak. Margaret clenched her jaw. She thought of all the other winners who had never stepped forward. Had they been bought off? Threatened? Worse? No. Not her. She wouldn't be another name that disappeared. The next morning, Margaret stood before a sea of cameras and microphones, her hands steady at the podium. The district attorney stood beside her, along with Ruiz and Samuel O'Connor. The world was about to hear the truth. My name is Margaret Turner, she began, her voice clear and unwavering. 3 weeks ago, I purchased a lottery ticket at my local gas station. That ticket was the winning number, $120 million. She paused, letting the murmurs settle before continuing. But when I went to claim my prize, I was told that I never bought that ticket. That my win never happened. They erased me. The cameras clicked furiously. The reporters leaned in, sensing something bigger than just one woman's claim. Margaret took a deep breath. But I have proof. And I am not the only one. This is not just about me. This is about all the winners who never got their prizes. This is about corruption at the highest level. And I will not be silenced. The room exploded. Questions flew at her from all directions. How high does this go? Who else is involved? Are you afraid for your safety? Margaret met the last reporter's gaze and spoke with quiet defiance. No. Because I know that once this truth is out, they can't make me disappear. That night, the news stations were flooded with coverage. Social media erupted. Hashtags trended. Public outcry was immediate. And then, the threats started. Anonymous calls. Cryptic messages. Cars idling outside her home for too long. Margaret knew what they were trying to do. Break her. Make her scared. Make her run. But Margaret Turner didn't run. Instead, she went on the offensive. She filed a civil lawsuit against the Lottery Commission. O'Connor worked tirelessly, gathering more victims, more testimonies, more damning evidence. Within days, the case had turned into a class-action lawsuit involving dozens of victims. The FBI got involved. Arrests were made. And then, just when Margaret thought things couldn't get any more shocking, Ruiz called her with one final bombshell. We found something, Mrs. Turner, he said over the phone, his voice tense. You need to come down to the station. Now. Margaret's pulse quickened. What is it? Ruiz hesitated. Then, finally, he said, it's about the woman who claimed your ticket. Margaret's stomach dropped. What about her? Ruiz exhaled. She wasn't working alone. She had a handler. And that handler is someone we never expected. Margaret gripped the phone tighter. Who? Ruiz's next words sent a chill through her bones. Someone inside law enforcement. Margaret gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles turned white. A law enforcement officer, someone within the system, had been orchestrating this whole thing? The very people meant to uphold justice were the ones manipulating it? She didn't wait for Ruiz to say another word. She grabbed her coat and was out the door in minutes, her mind racing with possibilities. As she stepped outside, she noticed a dark car parked across the street. It had been there before, but she hadn't thought much of it. Now, every shadow felt like a threat. Every parked car a watching eye. She got in her own car and started the engine, her pulse quickening when she noticed movement in the rearview mirror. Someone was inside that vehicle. Watching her. Margaret took a slow breath and gripped the steering wheel. She wasn't going to let paranoia stop her. They had already taken enough from her, her peace of mind, her sense of safety. She refused to let them take her courage, too. As she pulled out of the driveway, the car across the street did the same. They were following her. Her mind snapped into focus. She thought about going straight to the police station, but if someone inside law enforcement was involved, how could she be sure she wasn't walking into a trap? Instead, she made a sharp right turn, taking the long route through a more crowded part of town. The car followed. Her hands clenched the wheel. She glanced at her phone, debating whether to call Ruiz, when suddenly, the car behind her sped up, pulling beside her at a red light. She turned her head slightly. Two men in suits sat inside, both with expressionless faces. One in the passenger seat raised his hand just enough for her to see what he was holding. A badge. Margaret's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a corrupt officer. It was federal. The light turned green, and they didn't move. They just stared. A silent warning. Margaret pressed her foot against the gas and drove forward, but she wasn't going home. Instead, she drove directly to Samuel O'Connor's law office. When she arrived, she barely had time to slam the door shut before the lawyer looked up from his desk, his face immediately filling with concern. "What happened?" he asked, standing. Margaret exhaled sharply. "We were wrong," she said, voice tight. "This isn't just the lottery commission. It goes higher." O'Connor frowned. "Higher?" She nodded. "Federal. I was just tailed by two men who flashed government badges at me." O'Connor's face darkened. He moved swiftly to his office door, locked it, and pulled the blinds down. "This changes everything," he muttered, pacing. "The FBI is already involved in the investigation, but if there are federal agents protecting the criminals instead of arresting them, then we're dealing with a level of corruption that goes far beyond what we thought." Margaret swallowed hard. "What do we do?" O'Connor looked at her, his face set with determination. "We go public again, this time bigger. We..." And then, things got worse. That night, her phone rang. A number she didn't recognize. She hesitated, then answered. At first, there was only silence. Then, a deep, calm voice spoke. "You should have walked away." The line went dead. Margaret's hand shook as she lowered the phone. But she would not back down. If they wanted to scare her, they would have to try a lot harder. She had one option left. She grabbed her car keys, slipped on a pair of shoes, and made her decision. Moving as silently as possible, she went to the back door. If they were watching the front, they wouldn't expect her to slip out the back. The air outside was cold and crisp. She crouched low, moving toward her car. The SUV's engine was still off. Whoever was inside, they were waiting for something. She reached her car, ducked down behind it, and unlocked the door as quietly as she could. Just as she was about to slide into the driver's seat, a voice cut through the silence. "Going somewhere, Miss Holloway?" Her blood ran ice cold. Slowly, she turned. A man stood a few feet away, dressed in dark clothes, his face obscured by shadows. He didn't hold a weapon, but the way he stood, the casual confidence, made it clear he didn't need one. Margaret's grip on her keys tightened. "I don't know who you think you are," she said, keeping her voice steady, "but you're trespassing." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "Come on, now. We both know this isn't about property laws." Margaret's stomach twisted. "You shouldn't have gone public again," the man continued. "You were warned. But now? Now you're a liability." Her mind raced. If they wanted her dead, she'd already be dead. They weren't here to kill her. They were here to shut her up. "I'm not stopping," she said firmly. "So whatever you came here to do, get it over with." The man tilted his head, studying her. Then he sighed. "Look, I don't like messy endings," he said. "So here's my offer. Walk away. Disappear. Leave town. Drop this whole thing, and you can live your life in peace." Margaret narrowed her eyes. "And if I don't?" His smile faded. "Then you'll regret it." Silence stretched between them. Margaret's heart pounded. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but she stood her ground. Then, a car engine roared to life down the street. The man's head snapped toward the sound. A pair of headlights appeared, speeding toward them. The SUV doors flew open, and two men jumped in just as the vehicle peeled away. Margaret turned to see Ruiz's car screeching to a stop in her driveway. He jumped out, gun drawn. "Margaret. Are you okay?" She nodded, her breath shaky. "They were here. They tried to make me leave town." Ruiz cursed under his breath. "We need to move. Now." Margaret didn't hesitate. She jumped into Ruiz's car, and they sped off into the night. As they drove, Ruiz glanced at her. "This has gotten bigger than we thought." Margaret nodded. "I know." Ruiz took a deep breath. "We need to bring in someone who can actually do something about this. Someone above whoever's running this operation." Margaret turned to him. "Like who?" Ruiz's grip tightened on the wheel. "A federal investigator. One who isn't compromised." Margaret hesitated. "And how do we find one we can trust?" Ruiz exhaled slowly. "I might know a guy." Margaret swallowed hard. "Then let's do it." The next morning, Margaret and Ruiz met in a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. They were waiting for Ruiz's contact, a man named Agent Carter. Margaret's nerves were on edge. If this man was dirty, if he was working for the same people trying to silence her, then she was walking straight into a trap. Then the door opened. A tall man in a crisp suit walked in, his expression unreadable. He scanned the room, spotted Ruiz, and made his way over. Margaret's breath caught as he sat down. "Ms. Holloway," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You're in a lot of danger." She nodded. "I know." Carter leaned forward. "I've been investigating corruption within the Lottery Commission for years. But I never had enough proof. Your case. It's the break I needed." Margaret exchanged a glance with Ruiz. "So what now?" she asked. Carter's jaw tightened. "Now, we take them down. But you need to be ready. Because once we start this, there's no going back." Margaret took a deep breath. "I was never going back anyway." In the following weeks, Carter launched a full-scale federal investigation. Arrests were made. Names were exposed. The corruption ran deep, but with Margaret's evidence and Carter's team, the truth finally came to light. The scandal rocked the nation. The lottery fraud was dismantled, and those responsible were sent to prison, including high-ranking officials who had spent years rigging the system. As for Margaret, she refused to disappear. She became a public figure, an advocate for truth and justice. And though the threats never fully stopped, one thing was certain. She had won.